Overthinking is now my greatest strength, and it used to be my greatest weakness, and it may be the same for you. Let me explain. So basically, the reason I'm able to make these videos, the reason I'm able to put out a lot of content is because I think about this a lot. Like my mind is always coming up with ideas to like make videos, right? And that comes from the same place as overthinking. The issue is when it's used in a way that is not beneficial to you, but it's used in a way that's destructive, that makes you doubt yourself. You probably want to do something that involves putting yourself out there. Maybe it's making videos, maybe it's making comedy skits like I do. I make comedy skits on my comedy Instagram. Maybe it's something like that. Maybe it's something creative. Like you're probably a creative person because your mind is always coming up with ideas. And here's the thing, the whole like overthinking, anxious thoughts, and creativity, those thoughts usually start with the same two words. Can you guess what they are? What if? Like, oh, what if this person doesn't like me? What if they hate me? Well, like all these things, right? All these fears, they usually start with what if, because fear can actually be kind of creative, but it's just used in a way that's destructive. But if you could utilize that part of your brain, the creative part of your brain, the what if thinking, to be productive, then you don't know what you could come up with. Like some of my most random ideas have been things that could have been like fears. Okay, I'll give you an example. I had this idea for a movie where there's like a serial killer on a cruise. And the origin of this idea came from I was going on a cruise and I actually had the thought, like kind of like I would say maybe an anxious thought, like, oh, what if there's a serial killer on the cruise? And I was like, wait, that would be actually a pretty cool movie. So it's not necessarily like the thought that's the problem. It's how you respond to the thought. So like that could have been a destructive, overthinking thought, right? I could have been like, oh, I'm not going on the cruise because there's potential for this. Like, but I was like, oh no, this would be kind of like a cool movie idea, and I didn't treat it as like something that would impact my decisions, because ultimately like your decisions really define who you are more than your thoughts. Sure, you could have like overthinking thoughts, but if you don't let it impact your decisions and you're consistently like just doing the things that are beneficial to you, it won't control you. So that's step two. Step one is to figure out what's something that is going to utilize that part of your brain, the overthinking part of your brain. And step two is to not follow it when it feels like it may be holding you back from doing something or being the person that you want to be. But it could really be a superpower because you don't know what's going to happen if you start expressing yourself. Like let's say you with step one, you start making videos. Maybe it reaches 10 people, maybe it reaches 100 people, but you could have such a big impact on the world. Like even if it's like a small amount of people. Like I posted a video about how people should start making content, right? And it got and now it has like 700 views, right? But even when it had like a couple hundred views, like 200 views, there was like 20 comments of people saying that this video helped them. And that's not like a ton of views, right? It's not like a viral video. But even something small like that can make a big difference in someone's like perspective. So if you have a desire to start putting yourself out there in some way, then you have an obligation to yourself to do that, because that's how you would also utilize that overthinking part of your brain. Like that's what you want to do, right? If you've admitted to yourself you want to do it, and your mind is constantly thinking, like, then those two things are aligned. Your gut and your mind are aligned. So it means that you should do it. It means that you should do it. I'm gonna have some tea. I've been trying to record these videos with minimal cuts, so sometimes my mouth gets a little dry. So I covered how overthinking can be a superpower. So now, what do you do when you're overthinking in the moment? Like, let's say you have like a cold and you have the thought like, oh no, what if I die? That would be like an overthinking thought, right? Because you're probably not gonna die, right? So how do you handle that thought? The way to handle it, and this is from the book, The Worry Trick. This has helped like thousands of people. It's not my idea. It's from the book, The Worry Trick. If you want to read it, it's a great book on how to deal with like chronic worrisome thoughts. But the way to deal with it is you acknowledge the thought, right? So you're like, okay, this is an overthinking thought. What if I die? And then it's going to sound dumb, but you humor it. You exaggerate it, right? Because how you treat the thought is really what matters. The thought is just it's just a thought. But if you exaggerate it, then it becomes so ridiculous that it won't have any impact on you, right? So if you just have the thought, what if I die? It might have like a emotional impact on you. But if you go, what if I die and then I become a ghost and then I haunt everyone who's ever wronged me? Now you would kind of laugh at the thought, right? So it doesn't have a grip over you. But what a lot of people do is they try and argue with the thought. They try and argue with the thought, like, oh, what if I die? Oh, I'm not going to die because it's probably just a common cold. Well, then your mind will be like, well, what if it's not a common cold? What if it's a greater sickness? You know what I mean? So it's like you'll never win a what if argument because you can't predict the future. So the way to handle like these what if overthinking thoughts is by exaggerating them, acknowledging, exaggerating, and then you don't let it impact your decisions, right? Because if you had the thought like, what if I die, and you had like just a common cold, you might be going to the ER every time you have like the sniffles. But that wouldn't be beneficial. That wouldn't be the smart thing to do. You would go bankrupt, and then you'd have a worse chance of, of surviving because you wouldn't have any money, right? So what you would do is you exaggerate the thoughts so that it's ridiculous, so that you think of it as like so ridiculous that it's not going to impact your decisions. That's the best way that I found to handle overthinking thoughts. Another way to look at those overthinking, like worrisome thoughts, is you could just think of it as like a soundtrack, right? So there's this book called Soundtracks too that helps with overthinking. But basically, it's like you think of your thoughts as just like it's just playing in the background. It doesn't impact your decisions or what you want to do. So you let it play in the background, and then you also try and play some positive soundtracks. Like, and the way to do that is by like affirmations, positive thoughts, mantras, stuff like that. If you have the combination of those two things, like understanding that your thoughts are not going to control you, and then also being able to acknowledge and exaggerate them and not treat them as if they are the 100% truth, then it won't necessarily have a grip on you. So if you do those, and then you also express yourself in some way, like utilize your mind to the best of your ability, then I think that overthinking will become something that's actually beneficial to your life because you'll utilize it in a way that helps you express yourself that will ultimately help other people. And listen, dealing with overthinking worrisome thoughts is not necessarily going to be easy, but I think the impact that you could have because of your ability to think so much will be worth it. Life's not easy, but it's worth it. Take care.